Hello again everyone and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for November 3rd through the 9th, 2024. So let's get right to it. Starting with the Northeast region, as we all know, the American election is over, at least on the national stage. So Donald Trump has been elected to be president once again, and for the most part, that is basically settled. There has been some squabbling back and forth, and the general outrage that was expected, but for the most part, Trump won by such a decently large margin that there's really no really talk of recounts, at least for the presidential election. Now, some states are still counting with regards to local races. Some congressional seats were so close that there's probably going to be a recount in some districts. So, again, the election may be over for the presidential side of things, but in terms of other smaller, more local elections, some states are still kind of ironing those out. So we'll see how that shakes out in the next couple of weeks or so. But I think that even though the kind of anxiety and tension regarding the uncertainty of how the election was going to go, that tension may be quelled for a bit for right now, but another sort of apprehension kind of arises. And I think that a lot of people are kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. So in terms of unrest, violence potential, it's hard to say. Generally speaking, I personally am not seeing a whole lot of very large mobilization when it comes to, extreme leftist groups who would be the people protesting, demonstrating, causing unrest over this loss for them. So, not really seeing that at the moment. However, that can change very, very quickly. So, again, I just have some key dates here on the slide for everyone to kind of be aware of in terms of potential flashpoints as they come and go. So the sort of milestone that's coming up the soonest is the November 25th deadline for the certification of the election in the states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a few others as well. I just highlighted Pennsylvania and Michigan because they're still counting in some of those districts, and those are swing states, right? And the places where there's going to be the most potential for sort of unrest, right? So November 25th, you may see protests. I don't know, hard to say, but we'll kind of keep looking out for that. From that, December 11th is the safe harbor deadline where all of the states, all 50 states, have to have their ballots certified, their elections certified to send to the Electoral College. The Electoral College on December 17th meets to certify it themselves. And, of course, as we all know, on January 6th, the Electoral College votes are tallied in Congress, and the election is finally finalized and certified at the national level. And then the next date after that is, of course, the 20th, which is Inauguration Day. So all of these dates are potential points for unrest to kind of kick up. Again, really when it comes to politically liberal or leftist demonstrations, we have to follow the money. We have to follow the money with most things in life, but really with these demonstrations. And right now, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of very large NGOs or very large companies that are trying to stoke things and encourage things. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be any unrest. There already is unrest in the usual places by the usual suspects, right? But there's a huge difference between 50 guys rioting in Seattle and a 1,000,000-man march on D.C., right? So I really do want to stress that there's a lot of time. There's a lot of time between now and January, and we can always start seeing things sort of mobilize in terms of the left. Hasn't happened yet, for the most part, in a very large scale that might be concerning. But give it some time, and we'll see how things shake out. My guess is that this week, and probably the rest of this month, is going to be spent on just outrage and really just kind of emotional issues rather than any sort of deliberate mobilization attempt or organization. So, we'll just have to see how things work out. So that's pretty much all I have on that. I know not super helpful, but again, really just keeping an eye on things is going to be very crucial between now and January. Not just from leftist groups, but from institutions as well. The Department of Justice, State Department, these federal agencies and organizations and institutions, they're not going to want to give up their power that easily. So we'll see how things happen. My guess is there's a lot of paper shredding going on right now in D.C. and it will continue up until Inauguration Day. But again, we'll have to see how it all works out. Right now, there's just not a whole lot to go on. Moving down to the southeast region, kind of an odd story in South Carolina this week. 43 rhesus monkeys escaped from a research facility down there in Yemassee. I don't actually know much about it, but I did want to cover it because it's strange, and I think a lot of people were instantly thinking that these monkeys had maybe been infected with something or used for research purposes. This facility is a breeding facility, so they don't actually conduct research on the monkeys there. They ship them off to other laboratories around the United States for that sort of thing. So these guys just produce the monkeys. So the monkeys that escaped, all 43 of them, have allegedly not taken part in any kind of experimentation. They just don't have the facilities for that there. Again, as strange as it seems, this is not out of the ordinary for this area. This facility, they've had escapes from there before. So again, local authorities are trying to round him up, but they've set traps. And as of this morning, I checked, and I haven't seen any reporting that says they've caught even one of them yet. So, 40 monkeys are still kind of on the loose down there in South Carolina. Moving down to Florida, kind of a developing news story, if you will. Reporting came out last night, I mentioned it in the wire, regarding FEMA employees being told as part of the Hurricane Milton recovery efforts to avoid doing door-to-door engagement with people who had Trump signs or Trump flags on their property. So, again, just as a little bit of backstory or back information for this, when it comes to federal disasters, anytime a federal disaster zone is declared, a lot of things start rolling into play at once. One of the things that happens is if you have lost power for more than 36 hours straight, FEMA rolls in and they are required to go door to door and speak to citizens and explain to them verbally what their benefits are and the things that they're entitled to in terms of disaster relief. So cut to the Hurricane Milton situation. Hurricane rolls in, disaster zone declared, people are without power for a long time. FEMA gets activated and sends out crews to various communities to, it's not really so much a wellness check so much as it is a, federal requirement that FEMA actually inform citizens of what, their benefits are because they don't have power or something like that. So one of the crews, or one of the supervisors for several crews down there in Florida, told their people or issued their guidance, which you can see here, basically saying to avoid Trump supporters. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be kind of focusing on this and talking about how horrifically bad this is in terms of, well, it's just being straight up illegal, for one, but also in the context of election interference. You have to remember, Hurricane Milton happened right at the end of a presidential campaign, and a federal agency coming in and saying, no aid for you if you support Trump. That's like how it would take me an hour to talk about how many lines of federal code that violated. But in any case, it's hard to get context, right? Context is hard. Right now, FEMA is basically playing this off, or they are allegedly playing this off, as being a one-off thing. So jumping back, I know I'm kind of all over the place with this, but jumping back to the sourcing of this story, only one news media outlet has talked about this story, and that is the originating source, which is the Daily Wire. And it's up for you to decide for yourself if that is a trustworthy source or not, or if these screenshots and text messages are indeed genuine. That's up for you to decide. FEMA has allegedly communicated to the Daily Wire, their journalists there, and responded saying, basically throwing this one person under the bus, and that's kind of their story that they're going with. There hasn't been, as far as I have seen, there has not been an official press release or statement from FEMA directly to the American people, continuing the trend in government of agencies talking to media groups so as to avoid culpability and not being sort of like kind of on the record, off the record sort of thing. But they're not actually confessing to this federal crime openly. So, not that it would be expected, but I just needed to point that out in terms of sourcing. And the reason this matters is because people are focusing on the yellow parts here in this text. They're focused on this one person giving one order. And they're not really thinking about the whole picture, I think. This allows FEMA to kind of slip away and avoid a little bit of culpability there. For me, I am not concerned about, or I'm not surprised, concerned, or even really that upset that an extreme far leftist is in a position of authority in the government. These people have, for a long period of time, told us that the American taxpayer is their adversary. So I'm not surprised by this, and in the slightest. And if you look at the big picture of things, FEMA's just going to fire this person, or they're probably not even going to fire him. They're just going to move them around, shuffle them around, send them to another division, and they'll keep getting a paycheck. And basically, the action will stop, so the harm will stop. FEMA's already said, according to the Daily Wire, FEMA said they're sending people back out that may have been missed because of this crazy person issuing this directive they had no authority to issue. So the harm is going to be mitigated, even if the underlying problems are not. But I think that focusing on this one person and this one story and this one order avoids the larger problem, which is what? For me, the bigger problem is that not just one leftist going crazy, because that can happen in any institution, and that institution can say, all right, we had somebody go crazy, we're going to fire them, take them out of the equation, problem solved, right? No, not really. For me, the problem is that every single FEMA employee that saw this order followed it. They followed the illegal order. They caused harm to people because someone else told them to. That is a huge problem, and you're not going to slip away and get away and wiggle your way out of this just by firing one person. I want every single person who followed this order fired. I want them in prison, as a matter of fact, but that's just my own personal opinion. Timing is also very suspect. This came out after the election. This should have come out before the election. This should have come out, someone should have screenshotted this and sent that to a news media group immediately. But no, what did they do? They followed the order. They followed the illegal order. They caused harm to people because they were just following orders. Again, I don't want to rant and rave on this too much because I'm sure everyone can come to their own conclusions on this, but I did want to kind of point it out. So just to sort of soften the blow and kind of provide a little bit of context and calm things down a little bit, you can very clearly see, or at least I can very clearly see, that whoever wrote this order or directive doesn't know what in the Sam Hill they're doing. And they have probably never left their office ever. That means they shouldn't be in the position of working for FEMA, but it's to the point of hilarity, to be honest, if you read the very bottom of this text, because in addition to the whole don't visit Trump supporters kind of thing, the other practices that they give, the recommended best practices, are just utterly insane. The bottom two are just hilarious to me. Avoid high salt diets and coffee. And the funniest one to me is coconut water is a fast way to replenish your electrolytes quickly. Good grief, Charlie Brown. I think that anyone who has ever worked a day in their life outside of a cubicle can see this is just insanity, sheer insanity. For one, salt and coffee go hand in hand with any sort of manual labor outside. So, it's the way that this is going to be. And to suggest drinking coconut water to replenish your electrolytes, oh my goodness. Can you imagine? I think the last thing I would want to put in my body, if I'm down there going door to door in the hot Florida summer, it's 11 billion degrees outside, 1,000% humidity, the frogs are swimming by you in the air. It's absolutely miserable. Nobody's got electricity, resources are spread thin, and you're walking on foot from house to house to check on people and do your job, right? The last thing I would want to suck down is a container of lukewarm coconut water. I mean, good grief. Come on. Whoever wrote this is completely insane. Not to mention the fact that if you drink too much coconut water, what is going to happen dietarily to your body? We all know how this goes. And the last thing I would want to do is consume something that is going to be logistically challenging for me down the road, if you know what I mean. So anyway, I thought that was kind of hilarious that these people are so far detached from reality that they're telling people in a disaster zone to avoid salt and coffee, but coconut water is good. That's the shibboleth moment, right? Of just showing me that this person has no idea what in the Sam Hill they're doing. So, applying that logic, this context is important to applying the logic to the earlier thing. This is just some deranged leftist who's in a government job who you'll never unseat, probably a diversity hire. I can just sense it. And, that's basically what this probably is. FEMA's going to move them around. They're not going to fire them. They're going to move them around. And none of the people who originally followed the order are going to have anything bad happen to them, except for maybe they may be persecuted for going to the media over it. They may get backlash because they actually did finally say something about this illegal order. But again, I thought it was kind of hilarious in terms of just showing how ridiculously out of touch, FEMA is. But yeah, I know this is a horrific story, but hopefully that little bit of context, provides a little bit of fidelity on this sort of thing. I don't mean to downplay it at all, but I hope that kind of explains things a little bit, that this is probably indeed just some deranged leftist who's in a government job. And for me, looking at that is not surprising in the slightest. But what's more concerning to me are all the people who followed that order. That's a very big indicator of things to come. So, again, things to just keep in mind. So, moving on to another incident that kind of takes place in Florida. I will briefly mention the Iranian threats with regards to Trump and potential assassination attempts against him at the behest of Iran, allegedly. I'm going to be using that word allegedly quite a lot with regards to these sorts of things. Mostly because during Trump's first term, it was Russia, Russia, Russia. Now it appears to be Iran, Iran, Iran. So, again, we will see how this turns out. I believe 1,000% that the safety concerns to Trump are genuine. Like, that's a genuine thing. Like, the Secret Service needs to be revamped. DHS needs to be revamped. The FBI needs to be revamped. We need to actually, protect our nation and the military leadership of our nation, to include the commander-in-chief. That's just something every single nation on earth needs to do, from North Korea to Angola. Like, this is something that needs to happen, and it's not happening right now. But are those threats originating from Iran? Me personally, my own personal opinion, that I can only say it's my opinion so many times, is no. I don't think Iran is trying to assassinate Trump in the slightest. I don't buy that story at all, but I know that a lot of people do. And that's fine, I guess, but I just wanted to, kind of make it known that I personally am not buying the whole Iran angle, because I think that this is going to come back to bite us in the next few years. But anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So, again, indictments have been unsealed regarding alleged attempts to target Trump, and wouldn't you know it, the guy they're trying to arrest is not in custody. He's probably not even in this country. He's probably in Iran. So my guess is over the next few weeks, probably even before Inauguration Day, you're going to see these indictments come out again, probably for people that aren't even in the United States. So it's easy to do that, and the FBI can slap their report out there and say, oh, well, this guy was trying to kill Trump, but darn it, he's not even in the United States, so we can't do anything about it. Easy. Classic government 101. But anyway, I won't rant and rave on that too much. So let's roll things up with the United States and move over to Western Europe, where the outrage continues, as one might expect. Just briefly mentioning, because I think it's rather humorous. It's probably not funny for Germans, but I think it's rather entertaining. The sort of German government collapsed. So Scholz's coalition government has collapsed, and they're thinking that they may be doing an election in March, calling for a snap election then. They may or may not have that election in March. I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I saw this morning that there's a little bit of discrepancy as to whether or not they're actually going to have enough paper ballots to make the election happen. So I guess in Germany they're out of printers or something like that. Maybe they're just down for maintenance. I don't know. But either way, they don't have enough ballots printed, and for some reason that's an issue to print more between now and March. But anyway, I guess they'll figure that out, or they won't. Either way, I just thought it was kind of funny because this coalition collapsed basically at the exact same time Trump won the election, which to me, from an American taxpayer's perspective, I'm sure Germans have a whole different perspective on this, but to me it looks an awful lot like Western Europe is a little bit worried that their cash cow is drying up. So again, Trump, say what you want to about the man personally, or with regards to his politics or his beliefs or which nations he supports a little bit more than others. But one of the funnier things that he actually did was actually held NATO accountable for their spending. So you can look at the charts, you can look at the graphs. In terms of NATO spending, the United States, we started making, or were trying to start to make nations pay their own way, so to speak. So it looks an awful lot to me like the mere threat, the mere insinuation of Trump kind of coming back to NATO is making all these NATO member states lose their mind, and they're just kind of in shambles with regards to themselves having to pay a lot of money for defense, and they're broke. So it's kind of entertaining. I know I shouldn't laugh because hard times are coming for Europe, and it's going to be kind of hard. It's going to be hard for anyone to kind of steer the ship of Western Europe through this kind of thing. But Germany has made an awful lot of money off of the Ukrainian defense infrastructure, and I think that the reason why this has kind of come to a head when it has come to a head, as in like now, is because people are understanding that the Ukrainian war is going to end. It was going to end very, very soon. An armistice, a peace treaty, something's going to happen, and all of this defense money is going to have nowhere to go. So, Germany just starts exporting rather expensive missiles to Ukraine, and Trump's back in office now, and we're going to see how the defense industry actually works out. So, I don't know. It's kind of interesting, but I guess, again, we'll have to see how it goes. Moving on to Switzerland, let's briefly talk about a story which is not something that's normally in my wheelhouse. I don't normally talk about something like this because it doesn't really affect that many people, but I did want to mention it because it's interesting, and I just want to make sure it's documented for posterity's sake. Short version is, back in September, the makers and the senior staff of the Sarco death pods that they have established for those seeking to end their life prematurely, if you know what I mean. They have all been arrested, and they were arrested following the first client using their pod. So a lot of people were saying, okay, well, they were arrested back in September. We didn't really know why. We didn't really know why they were arrested. But over the past week, the indictments have kind of come to light, or rather forensic testimony has come to light, in which a forensic medical examiner noted strangulation marks on their first customer's neck. So just to cut right to the chase, it looks like their death pod didn't actually work, and the inventors had to make sure their customer was satisfied and murdered them instead. So again, hard to say exactly what happened, but that's kind of the general gist of it. And once again, not really something that I normally would talk about, but I felt that actually had to be documented for posterity's sake. So again, enough on that, but yeah, good grief. Sort of in the similar vein as something that I wouldn't ordinarily talk about, but I feel like I have to now because so many people are upset about it, is the situation in the Netherlands. So I honestly don't even know how to describe this without upsetting someone. So there was an incident, we'll just call it an incident, over the past couple of days in Amsterdam that is kind of taking place, or it took place, around the sphere of a soccer tournament. So varying accounts exist as to what actually happened and who started this sort of conflict. So yeah, the most recent information that I have that is decently confirmed is 60 plus people were arrested after trying to beat up a bunch of either Israeli citizens or Israeli soccer fans. I don't even know if they're actually Israeli or not, or if they were just waving Israeli flags. Hard to say, right? I can't verify citizenship records myself. Anyway, 60 plus Muslims go around and beat up a bunch of Israeli citizens or whatever following the soccer match. I don't actually know what happened here. I don't know the context of it. Some media sources and some reports suggest that the Israelis started it the day prior. I don't actually know. Maybe, maybe not. But I can tell you the numbers are very telling. So 60 plus people arrested, all of which are Muslim, migrants, because there's a huge Muslim migrant population in Amsterdam. And on the other side of the wire, on the other side of the conflict, 5 people were hospitalized with minor injuries. So I don't know, what does that like constitute? I mean, does that mean that the 60 plus people were just not that effective in their targeting, or what? I don't know. I don't think this is a terror attack, really. I mean, you can slap whatever label on it you want to, but I think that 63, Muslim migrants, if they wanted to cause mayhem, they could have killed a lot of people. They really could have, and they didn't. So to me, it looks like a lot of people just trying to beat each other up and just generally engage in soccer hooliganism, sprinkled with a little bit of fairy dust of geopolitical conflict that goes back 2,000 years. That's generally what I think it is. I'm sure I'll anger people on both sides of the aisle with that, but either way, I just can't figure out what actually went on. The mainstream media is lying about it as usual, which is what I alluded to in The Wire, but again, what the truth is, I don't know. I don't know, and as an American taxpayer, I don't really care. So I think we'll call it a wrap on Western Europe for today, and let's talk a little bit about the GhostNet. So this week was kind of interesting, mostly because there was an instance, I think, personally, of jamming, of military jamming. So just as a little bit of a brief aside, I know a lot of people don't really understand a lot of radio stuff, but so let me kind of explain what jamming is. I need to do a full-on video on this. I've been meaning to for a while, but the short version is, okay, every Thursday night we get together, and on Saturdays as well, but mostly on Thursday night we have this GhostNet radio network. People get on, with their radios, and they're able to exchange news, stories, and information and things like that. Well, this week, a lot of people noticed that there was a lot of interference all over the frequencies that we use for this sort of thing. And a lot of people were kind of misattributing some of this to maybe malign action and maybe not. So let me just clear the air a little bit for those of you who may be using JS8 call or maybe not super familiar with radio stuff. Bottom line is that this screenshot here in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, a lot of people were saying that this was jamming. And it is not. It is not jamming. It is perfectly innocent behavior. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what VAR AC looks like underneath your JS8 call spectrum. So if you were to do this for yourself at home, this is what a different mode looks like. It has nothing to do with JS8 call. It's just that you're seeing it on your screen because there's a little bit of overlap with the frequencies. So again, I'm just some guy. I can't, go in and say I own these frequencies and for everybody else to stay out. Like, these frequencies are mine. That's not how radio works. We all have to share. And it just so happens that the GhostNet frequency, 7.107 megahertz, takes place right in the middle of one of the frequencies used by VAR AC. It's not very common. I mean, you'll occasionally see that, like if there's a contest or something, but you'll see this big blob of signal in the middle of your screen, and you can't transmit through it. It's kind of garbling your message, and that's why. It's not malign action. I mean, I guess it could be, but it's just someone using VAR AC, and because we're sharing one of their frequencies, that's how that works. Now, with that out of the way, what does real jamming look like? Well, we found out Thursday night, now didn't we? This is what very significant interference looks like on the radio. These vertical lines that you can see moving down what we call the waterfall, this blue thing here. So I was kind of curious about what people were saying about it and who was picking it up. And as we can see here, most of the messages that I received during the regular GhostNet meeting were pertaining to this. So a lot of people saw it. And a lot of people were saying, or they were thinking that this VAR AC thing was the jamming. That was not the jamming. This right here was the jamming. Now, I should note that this screenshot here was from my web SDR. So I was using the Milford, Pennsylvania web SDR to get this screenshot. On my personal radio, I didn't see this. So because I'm too far away, I think, and my antenna is in an INVIS configuration, so it's a different way of operating. In any case, though, I thought it was very interesting. for a few different reasons. A few people here in the chat, so to speak, on GhostNet thought it may be the Chinese fire drake military jamming. And I don't think so. I mean, it could be, but I don't think so. It looks different. Fire Drake looks different on JS8 call. These vertical lines, what they're trying to do, what all jamming tries to do, is simply shout louder than someone else. On radio, you can't pull a signal out of the air. Okay, once a signal is transmitted into the atmosphere, you can't just grab it and pull it down. It doesn't work that way. But what you can do is just shout louder. So if I've got a 10-watt radio and I'm transmitting on this frequency, and somebody next to me has a 100-watt radio and they're transmitting on the same frequency at the same time in the same mode, they're going to drown me out and no one will hear me. They will only hear them. That's how jamming works. And in this case, someone or something was causing a lot of interference about every 50 hertz or so along the waterfall to try to prevent messages from getting out. Now, the grand question then becomes, was this just innocent interference? Because this kind of interference occurs all the time. A lot of you who may live in cities or something like that, and you try to get into radio, you'll see a lot of vertical lines on your screen a lot of times. Well, that's interference in a lot of cases. So it could have been innocent interference. It could also have been solar weather. Again, sunlight and the radiation from the sun has a very strong influence on high frequency or shortwave radio, like what we're using for the GhostNet. So it could have been solar weather causing a lot of interference up in the atmosphere. So the things that tell me this is probably intentional jamming of something. Probably not us directly. Like nobody in the world cares enough about the GhostNet to try to jam us specifically. It was probably somebody jamming something else, and it just happened to bleed over into our little radio net that we do. But the indications that tell me that it was probably that is, one, the spacing. It's shockingly on point, so it's significant. It's not just one line of interference. A ham radio operator could not put this much interference out if they tried. You need a power station to blast this much signal out over this wide of an area. So that's a huge indicator. Another huge indicator is that it started and stopped. So it was immediately turned on and then immediately turned off. Or it lasted a little while. So it tells me it was probably military jamming of something. What? I don't know. I mean, I was in the same time zone as the SDR that I was using to receive this. So we had the same amount of daylight overhead. So I didn't get this interference on my radio. So I can probably rule out sunlight, right? Because the Milford, Pennsylvania SDR had the same amount of daylight that I did. And they had interference and I did not. But really the reason for me wanting to kind of talk about this, I know a lot of people are very bored to death with this kind of thing, but the reason that I wanted to talk about this is maybe for those of you who have already read between the lines, if you know what I'm talking about, with regards to this. So what does this tell me? Well, if it was military grade jamming, be it Chinese, American, whatever, if it was military grade jamming, if it was some kind of over the horizon radar, if it was some kind of military thing, and they were trying to stop somebody, probably not us directly, but maybe a propaganda radio station or something, if they were trying to stop them from transmitting, what does this tell us? Well, here's a little bit of information that might be helpful for some of you. You see these JS8 call messages that are kind of behind the jamming? You can kind of see them through these vertical lines here. Every single one of these decoded for me. So that tells me a lot, doesn't it? It tells me that even when interference is this strong, I can still use JS8 call. Now, does that automatically translate to JS8 call is military jamming proof? No, of course not. There were a lot of people who did report that they couldn't get any signal out because they were probably too close to whatever was causing this interference, be it military jamming or whatever. But for me, I could still pick them up. So they couldn't hear themselves transmitting, but I could. So even, this may be an indicator. It's not proof of anything. Pardon me for not having the budget to go out and buy a $2 or $3 billion military jamming suite that may be used in Ukraine or something. I don't have that funding to test this really, so we kind of have to rely on something like this. So to me, this is evidence, this is an indicator, not definitive proof, but this is an indicator that even in times of extreme interference, JS8 call may still work, which is interesting, again, for those of you who maybe can read between the lines on this sort of thing. Again, I just want to stress it's not jamming proof. This may or may not have been military jamming at all. It could have just been an issue at the radio station. Who knows? It could have just been an issue with the SDR. But, I thought it was pretty interesting. Occasionally you'll see this on HF radio. Actually, more than occasionally. It's fairly common on HF radio to see jamming, all the time. All the nations, Russia, China, the United States, we all jam each other's shortwave radio signals. So, again, it's not uncommon. But I thought it was very interesting that even in this kind of oppressed, less than permissive environment, JS8 call still worked. So again, this is kind of a little interesting little tidbit that we can maybe glean some useful information from. And I thought it would also be a good opportunity to talk about the difference between no kidding, like interference / probably jamming, and something that's VARA, okay? Because a lot of people were seeing that this VARA go out, this message that's purely innocent, and they were saying, oh, it's VARA, it's not jamming. Well, that's because that person couldn't see this, what I was seeing. So somebody on the other side of the country, they had no jamming, and they were just seeing VARA go out, and they thought, oh, well, people are stupid, and they're just seeing VARA, and they think it's jamming. No, that's not what was happening. Some people were, no kidding, being jammed, and that's where the understanding and the knowledge and the experience comes in to be able to say, okay, I am in this location, it is not VARA, I confirm that it is interference from this frequency to this frequency, steps every so often, you can start kind of narrowing this thing down. A few people were trying to direction find it. That's a good first step. Another first step is to pull up your actual SDR, not just JS8 call. Pull up an actual SDR and take a look at it and see how wide it is. Because I didn't do that. I was kind of busy, but yeah, again, we can get into this a lot more. I've already gotten way off topic on this as is, but we'll talk more about this later. I just wanted to briefly talk about this for a moment because I thought this is kind of interesting. So let's wrap things up for today. I know I've been kind of all over the place today, but that's pretty much all I have for today. Again, we'll just have to see how things work out. I know a lot of people are still kind of tense, waiting for things to kind of shake out with the election and kind of wondering when the next threat's going to pop up. We'll take that as it comes, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So for now, that's all I've got. Again, thank you all for all of your support, and we will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.